Good response. The Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies is committed to leadership in the critical examination of leisure and its relationship to individual and community well-being. We do so in a variety of ways. One, by modeling excellence and innovation through our teaching, research, and outreach. By facilitating engaging and high-impact student learning experiences to inspire passion, action, and leadership. By fostering a sense of belonging through meaningful and ongoing relationships among students, faculty, staff, practice, and community, and working collaboratively to understand and transform individuals, practice, community, and society. These aspirations are embodied in today's celebration. Today, we honor two very special colleagues for their outstanding contributions to leisure scholarship. Dr. Dana Kivel from Sacramento State University and Dr. Doug Kleber from the University of Georgia are 2017 recipients of the Shaw-Mannell Lecture Research Award. Established in 2010, the Shaw-Mannell Lecture Research Award commemorates the outstanding contributions of two University of Waterloo faculty members, Drs. Sue Shaw and Roger Mannell, by recognizing outstanding individual career research achievements that have influenced leisure scholarship at the University of Waterloo. We are delighted both Sue and Roger are here to take part in today's program, so thanks for being with us. Nominees for the award are put forward by members of the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies and must embody one or more of the attributes that characterize the University of Waterloo. Specifically, their research must be innovative, creative, collaborative, courageous, risky, critical, unconventional, and/or connected. In our view, as a group of faculty, we believe these characteristics are embodied in Drs. Kivel and Kleber. In addition, nominees are also considered for their career contributions to the study of leisure, their influence on leisure scholarship at the University of Waterloo, and their international contributions to leisure studies. I will leave it to my colleagues, Drs. Diana Perry and Sherry Dupuis, to provide more information and description of the achievements of Drs. Kivel and Kleber when they introduce our esteemed colleagues. This year's event is particularly special because it coincides with the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies' 50th anniversary. From the spring of 1967, when the Ontario Ministry of Education invited the University of Waterloo to initiate a degree program in recreation, to our present status as the top-ranked program in recreation and leisure studies, our department has evolved dynamically, innovatively, and perhaps stubbornly from a fledgling program of study to one of the largest and most prestigious of its kind worldwide. I'm truly proud to count myself among the outstanding people, students, staff, and faculty who have actively contributed to this journey over the years, both from the past and the present. I also count myself thankful to be a passionate member of the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences, a faculty committed to promoting quality of life. AHS, including our department, is active in leading new conversations about health and well-being. The two lectures today are part of the Shaw-Mannell Lecture Series, one of the tangible ways that the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences demonstrates its commitment to promoting health and well-being. And AHS is happy to continue the momentum of the Shaw-Mannell Lecture Series today, made possible because of the legacy of a generous and visionary philanthropist whom I would like to tell you about at this time. Lyle S. Hallman was a developer, contractor, and noted philanthropist in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. He was the recipient of many awards, including the Order of Canada and an honorary doctorate from the University of Waterloo. Generous donations made Lyle with his wife Wendy, generous donations made by Lyle with his wife Wendy to the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences created a number of endowments to expand and sustain health promotion activities within the faculty. These endowments have had significant impact on the health and well-being of our community through research activities and the spread of knowledge related to health promotion through many outlets, including these sessions today. We thank them for their generosity. Through their giving, we are afforded an opportunity to look at some of the issues related to health and well-being by examining the controversies, challenges, and opportunities inherent in what it means to be well. Indeed, our talks today by our speakers will focus on wellness broadly speaking, and we will begin with Dr. Kivel, who asked the provocative question, are we ready for radical leisure? Prepare yourself to be challenged, engaged, and inspired. Before I hand over the podium to my colleague, Dr. Diana Perry, who will introduce Dr. Kivel, I want to mention once again on behalf of the department, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, it is my absolute pleasure to be here today to introduce Dr. Dana Kivel to all of you. For most of us in the department, Dr. Kivel needs no introduction, as she is well known as one of the field's top feminist leisure researchers. Her potential impact as an academic was recognized very early on when she was selected as one of the field's first future scholars, which is a highly competitive process that selects 2 master's students annually to attend the National Parks and Recreation Association Conference. At this conference, they are mentored by a top scholar in their area of interest and also explore PhD programs. From that experience, Dr. Kivel went on to pursue her PhD at one of the field's top institutions, the University of Georgia, where she studied under the supervision of Dr. Doug Kleber, who is also with us today. Dr. Kivel's groundbreaking work was amongst the first to call attention to sexual and gender diversity within leisure studies. Using a feminist intersectional lens, Dr. Kivel brilliantly examines the way that gender intersects with other identity markers, including race, sexuality, class, ability, and age, to impact upon leisure experiences, outcomes, choices, and activities. Her work is highly recognized in the field as being theoretically and methodologically sophisticated, yet accessible, and of the highest quality with large impact. As one of the pioneers of sexual and gender diversity research within leisure studies, Dr. Kivel has had the significant ability to advance both the direction and the outcomes of social justice research within leisure studies. In addition to being an exceptional scholar, Dr. Kivel has been an outstanding academic citizen. She served as a chair of her department during years of program closures, budget cuts, and increased demands on faculty. In addition, Dr. Kivel served as the director of community engagement at Cal State University. Through it all, Dr. Kivel has put her research into action, advancing social justice within the community. For example, she founded Lyric, which was one of the first LGBTQ youth centers in the United States. Located in San Francisco, Lyric is still active today and a huge source of social and emotional support for LGBTQ youth and their families, while serving to build community and inspire positive social change. Lyric is just one of the many, many, many examples of the ways that Dr. Kivel is contributing to a world that honors, respects, and appreciates LGBTQ people and allies of all races, classes, genders, abilities, and ages. Taken together, it is clear that Dr. Dana Kivel is a role model for leisure studies and a truly outstanding academic and citizen. We are so fortunate to have her with us here today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dana Kivel.
Well, I want to begin today by thanking all the folks who made my visit here possible. Diana, thank you so much for that introduction. Really appreciate that. I was very surprised also by the nomination. I was very surprised and touched, and thanks to the entire faculty in the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies at the University of Waterloo for your support and the honor that you are bestowing on me today. Oh, hey, Mark. Hey. Hey. Sorry? No. I am truly humbled by this award. Thanks to Troy and Sandy Highs, who helped me to understand where I needed to fly and how to get here from there. Thanks also to Corey Johnson. Where is Corey Johnson? with whom I've had many conversations, written many words, and because of you and our collaborations, many good ideas have seen the light of day. So amen, my brother from another mother. Thank you. Special thanks to the other award winner, Doug Kleber. Really, without him as my dissertation co-chair, along with Dr. Patricia Bell-Scott, I wouldn't be here today. Doug challenged me, pushed me to think in different ways, and disagreed with me in a very agreeable Doug-like fashion, but always supported me personally and professionally. I'm also glad we're being honored here together today, the teacher and the student, and now longtime colleagues and friends. Thanks to the individuals for whom this award is named, Sue Shaw and Roger Mannell. Both of you have influenced and inspired me. Roger spent time with us in numerous doctoral seminars at Georgia, and we engaged in many lively conversations about behavior and nature and nurture. I do not think I ever did get him to come around to my way of constructivist thinking. And Sue, your thinking, writing, critiques, and analyses of gender, culture, hegemony, and institutions have been pivotal in my development as a teacher, scholar, and activist. And I am actually indebted to you because of a conversation we had in Canada at the end of the last century. That just sounds weird, the end of the last century. That's just weird. You basically took me to task because you believed that I had much to say and needed to get more written and more ideas out into the journals. That talk, more than anything else, was perhaps the most important conversation of my 20-plus year career in the field. I was at a critical point in my professional development, and your words were an inspiration. You have been a mentor in the truest sense of the word and a professional lifesaver. Thank you. Finally, I want to thank my spouse, Sharon Agigian, who is here with me today. I am grateful for her love, support, and enduring belief in me. She has challenged, sustained, nurtured, and nourished me in ways I could never have imagined and made our last 10 years together seem like 5 minutes. I only hope we are fortunate enough to have millions of minutes together in the years ahead. So, are we ready for radical leisure? Lessing wrote, quote, "Let us be lazy in everything except in loving and drinking and in being lazy." In July of 2010, I was finishing my 5th year as department chair and was feeling pretty burned out. The largest economic recession in history since the Depression had led me to have to lay off virtually all of our adjunct faculty, and promises of pay increases in our union contract were rescinded. And I had just overseen a process of implementing furloughs for all faculty and staff that resulted in an overall 10% pay decrease for everyone. Understandably, morale on campus in our department was at rock bottom. And it was a scorching summer in Sacramento, which actually, if you knew Sacramento, that's not that unusual, but it was still a scorching summer. And I was in desperate need of 2 things, peace and quiet and cooler temperatures. I decided to head for the mountains of Santa Cruz, California, to a place called Vajrapani Retreat Center for a 10-day silent retreat. I went there not knowing anyone and not knowing exactly what a 10-day retreat would entail. Looking back on this experience, I realized that the website most likely was intentionally vague. Once I got settled in, had dinner, and spoke with a few people, I started to relax about it and thought, hey, this is going to be great. Good food, little conversation here and there with interesting people from all over the world in a beautiful setting in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Then we had a little talk after dinner. Really, it was our 4 teachers doing the talking. They explained what the process was. Up at 5 a.m. and the first sitting meditation at 5:30. The days would rotate between sitting and walking meditation from 5:30 a.m. until 9 p.m., with an hour for a work meditation, working in the kitchen, on the grounds, etc., and an additional hour break in the middle of the day. In addition, the teachers gave Dharma talks in the evening, talks that focused on the different aspects of meditation and Buddhism, the 5 aversions, the 8-fold path to enlightenment, Sukha, which is about joy, Dukkha, which is about suffering, and other aspects of self-actualization that I would never attain. So early on, I kind of stopped taking notes. My anticipated level of enjoyment of the 10 days was starting to diminish. Then came time for the commitment process. As a group, all 45 of us made a verbal commitment to abstain from using alcohol and drugs, unless prescribed, sexual behavior, taking things that did not belong to us. There were no locks on any doors. And finally, no talking to anyone at all for 10 days. I was warned that the first 36 hours were the hardest. They call this period letting go of the monkey mind, the nonstop chatter and conversations in your head. Things like examining why you were at the retreat, how stupid silent retreats are, and chastising yourself for not fully knowing that a 10-day silent retreat means there would be no talking or contact with people apart from sitting next to or in front of or behind them in the meditation hall. There was also no direct eye contact. It turned out, however, that we could do some talking and connecting with people. Retreat leaders set aside time to meet with new people, to check in with us, and to see how things were going, and to answer questions about the retreat process. This meant you could engage in speaking 2 to 4 minutes every few days, or you could write notes to the teachers, but not with other people. Once the first 36 hours went by, then 48, then 72, and up until the end, it did, in fact, get a lot easier to engage in sitting and walking meditation and to actively quiet my mind. It was an amazing process to witness, seeing my mind go from monkey to not quite, but pretty close to Zen mind. At one point, I was having a hard time, and one of my teachers shared with me a mantra that has been a good friend and guide for me for the past 7 years. He said, when you are struggling to quiet your mind, say this phrase: nowhere to go, nothing to do, no one to be. I repeat this mantra to myself when I'm having a hard time going to sleep, or when I need to ground myself before a meeting or potentially difficult conversation. And in saying this phrase, I also realized 2 things. One, you cannot think 2 different or disparate ideas or things at once, which is a great thing to know and learn. 1 idea or thought at a time. And this mantra, which echoes the Aristotelian notion of leisure, freedom from the necessity of being obligated, should be the essence of what leisure is as we move well into the 21st century. For the past 50 years, hundreds of articles have been published in the major journals that examine leisure, recreation, and parks in North America. Journal of Leisure Research, Leisure Sciences, Journal of Park and Rec Administration. Yet despite research and conceptualizations around these topics, we are no closer to influencing policy, shifting public opinion, or persuading ourselves and each other that the idea of leisure is something that we should value, embrace, and fight for in terms of a shorter work week, and for that matter, a shorter work life. How relevant will our field be, especially if in 2067 people are still working 40+ hours a week with no paid vacations, and those with paid vacations do not take them, as many people do not take them these days? The early 20th century was synonymous with struggles of the labor movement and the 40-hour work week. Codified at the end of the 1930s, this 40-hour work week continues to be the standard throughout the United States. Almost 20 years into this century, that labor movement, hard fought with many victories, has largely been diminished or has been co-opted by the rise of neoliberalism. Swidler wrote, quote, "The organized labor movement of the moment, fighting rearguard actions against neoliberalism, appears unable to mount a cultural critique of work," end quote. I'm not sure which is worse. Our failure as a society to embrace a collective understanding and appreciation for leisure, or our inability and or unwillingness to offer a collective critique of work, while also not doing more to agitate for shorter work weeks and mandatory vacation time. In fact, not only do we not embrace leisure, but we do not, as Swidler suggests, know how to resist work. She cites the professoriate to make her case. She argued, quote, "Academic professionals, notorious for their own ever-rising standards of work hours and productivity, have failed to appreciate the importance of work resistance, not merely as a weapon of class rebellion, but as an essential element of sustainability for the planet." We may speak about and engage in many leisure pursuits. We're not total hypocrites, but we're also serious workaholics. The job never ends. When you're teaching, you are preparing to teach or grading, or researching, or reviewing, or researching the next article, or preparing files for tenure and promotion, or reviewing a manuscript, or preparing presentations for conferences, or reading articles about the need to do all of these things. As I was starting my career, I was told, if you don't have something in the hopper, you better be worried. The implication was always be thinking, writing, teaching, and doing something. going somewhere, or becoming someone relative to work. If we are too busy reading, researching, or writing about leisure to enjoy and or benefit from it, what does that say about us? Eve Swidler, in her essay about radical leisure, which was published in the Socialist Review, sets about discussing the construct of leisure, not so much in terms of what constitutes it, as much as under what conditions it can exist. For her, there is no radical leisure without a phone call. For her, there is no radical leisure without a comparable radical re-examination and reconstruction of work. Specifically, she argues there should be more of an alignment between organized labor and those fighting to shorten the work week. Among the fighters, she referenced Juliet Shore, Take Back Our Time, and Voluntary Simplicity Networks, and the historian Benjamin Honeycutt, who she described as, quote, "He has devoted much of his career to describing labor's fight for shorter hours in the United States," end quote. Apart from Professor Honeycutt, no one else from our field is mentioned. In some ways, we are so focused on doing research about what leisure is and isn't, and about who does and doesn't have it, and about what gets in the way of people doing it, or how it does or doesn't influence how people see themselves, their relationships with others in the world, that we seem to have forgotten that there's a critical relationship between the construct of work and the construct of leisure. What is our commitment to promoting leisure, critiquing work, advocating for shorter work weeks, and for mandatory vacation time? And perhaps more importantly, why aren't we, collectively, as a field, resisting work? When we write about leisure without also acknowledging, analyzing, and or challenging the construct of work as the central organizing principle of our lives, then we are unwittingly contributing to the hegemony of work. Marszalek argued that, quote, "a core belief system of capitalism that a job satisfies our basic social needs exposes the ideology of scarcity and sacrifice that supports capitalism's discipline of production," end quote. Reed, Golden, and Caterberg asserted that until now, quote, "until now, leisure has been seen as an add-on to the main focus of life, which has devoted itself to production and consumption. Given those ideas may have outlived their usefulness and penultimate place in human affairs, there's a need for society to construct an alternative raison d'etre," end quote. For the past few decades, we have seen several shifts in the nature of work, the lessening of opportunities for employment, and the nature of employment. We have also seen tremendous growth among contingent workers, especially adjunct faculty on college campuses. Some refer to these individuals as the precariat, those who submit to precarious employment, while others refer to them as members of the gig economy, those who do not want traditional 9-to-5 jobs, but rather who seek out opportunities to be contract workers. Being a contractual worker can easily lead to job insecurity and exploitation, but, quote, "some workers are seeking opportunities for empowerment and collaboration and cooperative ownership," end quote. Through our research, we know, both implicitly and explicitly, that leisure is as important and sometimes more important than work, that it enhances the quality of people's lives, that people value their leisure, and that it influences virtually every aspect of our lives. Yet perhaps our laser-sharp focus on doing research to justify the importance of leisure in our society without simultaneously and collectively challenging the underlying economic structure of capitalism and the institution of work may have far-reaching implications for the long-term impact of our research. Yet there have been critiques and analyses of work, but these have been made primarily through examining social class, identity, and issues of constraints. We document why people don't have as much access to leisure because of employment, but we don't offer critical analyses of employment, nor do we critique the structure of employment, the limitations and exploitative nature of capitalism itself. These studies have been critically important in terms of recognizing inequitable issues of access to leisure and the ways in which individuals who have been constrained have also developed strategies for negotiating different constraints. In contrast to these studies, which focused on individuals or groups, Clark and Critcher in The Devil Makes Work examined leisure within a larger institutional framework relative to labor. And Rose and Dustin took an institutional approach to their critique of neoliberalism's impact on higher education programs in our field. Within this critique, they make explicit the connection between work and leisure. They asserted that, quote, a common critique from leisure studies is that Calvinism and a Protestant work ethic have led people to value work, materialism, consumption, and capitalism over classical notions of leisure, end quote. Indeed, our ideas and sense of self and agency have become rooted in consumption and consumerism to the extent that the marketplace becomes the arbiter of what is real and truthful. And the idea of facts as things that are based on empiricism get crowded out for easily accessible and understood opinions and commentary. And bickering over opinions leads to increasing frustration as people cede their power to strong men and straw men. And hence, in the States, we find ourselves in a strange and dangerous moment. But I digress. I just had to, that kind of got inserted in the last minute, but it's connected. Rose and Dustin argue that critiques of the Protestant work ethic are common in our field, but they have not been found throughout the bulk of our research and scholarship. Nor have we offered original critiques about the roots of capitalist and Calvinist work ethics in the US. Indeed, without a critique of the moralistic underpinnings of the work ethic vis-a-vis leisure, we unwittingly reify it, and so do we reify a view of leisure that is inextricably and in some ways insidiously linked to hegemonic Christianity. Again, we may view how various religious and cultural groups think about and engage in leisure, but we don't examine how the role of hegemony and religion generally, and Christian hegemony in particular, influence our views and practices of both work and leisure. We know that leisure is subordinate to work for the vast majority of people in the United States. Unemployment is still high, especially in factory towns of all sizes, and once thriving farm communities have been swallowed up by international agribusiness. Also, contingent labor is precarious and potentially exploitive. Knowing all of this, how should we begin to frame our analyses and discussions of leisure vis-a-vis the construct of work? What exactly and precisely is our role? To educate, advocate, agitate, and or collaborate with each other, with unions, with leisure studies, policymakers. Who is and should be challenging the role and meaning of work in society? And how can we begin to, quote, resist work? In my experience of this field, rarely, if at all, have we collectively, as the Academy of Leisure Sciences, formerly known as the Society of Park and Recreation Educators, made pronouncements about public policy issues. Historically, I think we have deferred to National Recreation and Park Association as the public policy and advocacy mouthpiece of our field. I think this has to shift. I am hopeful that we will find our collective footing so that as a unified field, we might speak out on labor-related issues, since there is a connection between the beneficial outcomes that we seek in terms of leisure and the ways in which we situate and position the role of work and labor in our society. Indeed, while we have made some strides shifting from identity-based research toward more structural analyses and have incorporated analyses around resistance, Shaw, and intersectionality, we have not focused our efforts on the relationship among leisure, unemployment, underemployment, and institutionalized oppressions. A recent example illustrates the problem. At the end of 2016, Dr. Don DeGraff, president of the Take Back Your Time organization in Seattle, sent a note to our leisure education network informing us that after 15 years he would be stepping down in that role, and he hoped the organization would continue. A few people in the field wrote responses thanking Dr. DeGraff for his important work and dedication to education and advocacy. There were 4 or 5 individual responses on the listserv, but no collective response of thanks. No collective response to say we would pick up the mantle. Personally, I thought to myself, this is going to be a huge loss if this organization does not continue, because really it is one of the most visible manifestations of the work that we do. But I didn't step up. nor did I encourage others to do so. I still wonder why I didn't step up, because I know we have to constantly work toward challenging and resisting the hegemony of work. A footnote to this story is that someone did eventually step up to take on de Graaf's role. I include myself in here when I say I don't think that we can complain that the public doesn't take our work seriously if we ourselves cannot be motivated to take action to support a cause that fundamentally influences all aspects of the research and scholarship that we do. Individually, we have a tremendous impact on the communities in which we live, but collectively, I'm not sure how powerful our voice is or has been. Historians, sociologists, and psychologists have probably written more about leisure and probably gotten more public recognition of the importance of this construct than those who have been laboring for decades in this field. I think there is not only a gap between theory and practice in the field, but a gap in terms of our desire for our work to be of public value and relevance and our willingness to advocate for it. Swidler's notion of radical leisure will not miraculously appear, nor will a manifesto outlining the steps for collective action around work resistance. If we want our work to matter, to be transformative in terms of social change, vis-a-vis the nature of leisure, then we must also simultaneously include critical analyses of the nature and structure of work. Indeed, if we want the right to be lazy, and if we want to embrace Aristotelian leisure, and have nowhere to go, nothing to do, and no one to be, then we will need to speak about, write about, and make space for discussion and dissent about the hegemony of work. Yes, we will have to work toward resisting work, ironic, and more than that, we will need to become allies and activists with those fighting for change in the communities in which we live and work. And so the answer to the question, are we ready for radical leisure, is, at this point, not quite yet. Thank you.
And I want to say, first of all, how pleased I am to be here. There's so many people in the audience that I know and I've worked with, and lots and lots of young people out there who I don't know at all. Since I have been retired for more than 6 years now, it's a long time. I don't go to conferences anymore. I do other things, but I don't do the academic work. I don't do the academic writing. And I have a life of leisure. So now I have to talk about work and leisure. I do remember working. I do remember what it was like. So I'm very pleased to be here. And I'm very pleased about the 2 award winners today. They're both wonderful people that I know really well. And I get to comment on Dana's work. So I was delighted when I heard that you, Dana, were going to get one of these awards. I've actually never been to any of those award ceremonies because not only am I retired, but I live far away from here. I must have been trying to escape Waterloo or something, I'm not sure. But I'm very happy where I am now. But I have always admired your work for the depth of thinking in your work, and also for the activism that comes with it, the work that you've always done in your communities and in academia as well. And I think that's wonderful how much you have done. When I first heard that you were an award winner and you were writing a paper and I was going to critique it, I thought it was going to be the work that you'd done before. I thought it was going to be connected with the reproduction of heterosexism, of challenging that, of working through leisure to provide positive environments for LGBT communities. And I know you did so much of that work and so successful in communities and in academia. So I was surprised when I saw what you were talking about this time. and it's radical. It's radically different from what you said before, but it's radical anyway. I don't know if I was disappointed, only marginally, that perhaps you'd moved away, you'd no longer looking at that, no longer doing the same kind of activism. But when I saw what you were writing about, I was intrigued. I was really, really intrigued. I was surprised and I was pleased that you had moved to this very demanding, I think, suggestion that you're making to everybody, and a very challenging one for us to move in different directions. And particularly, I think what I'm picking up from what you're saying is moving to not just focusing on leisure, but to focusing on leisure within the world that we live. And it is a world that is structured by work, employment, money, income, or lack of money, lack of income. I thought, I was impressed. What you were talking about is less about the discussions, or I think you're suggesting that we don't focus only on discussions of the importance of leisure. We don't focus only on opportunities that leisure provides. We don't only focus on leisure meanings and values, importance, in a sort of isolated way. That we need to integrate this into the broader worlds that we live in, the broader society that we live in. And that's not a critique of, it's not really a critique of any particular piece of research or area of research, but a new sort of challenge to move outside of the more narrow thinking. So this understanding of leisure, I think, is a radical critique of leisure in society, and particularly thinking about those structures and beliefs about work. Your approach changes some basic assumptions in society, and it offers a new form of what I see as applied research. I mean, in some ways, I don't like that term applied research, but we do use it, pure research, applied research. And this is applied in a very practical way, applied in something that's incredibly important to all of our lives. Of course, in leisure studies, we've always valued applied research. There is a lot of applied research. There's therapeutic recreation, for example, parks management, tourism, environmental stewardship, research related to health and well-being. And there has been a little bit of research over the years about work and leisure, but not very much, and not looking at leisure within a work-focused society. Very, very little of that has been done. So I think your approach has enormous potential to move forward in our understanding, to move forward in the importance of the work that we do, and to make a change in the academic world, in our understanding, but also in the practical world. I think what you're saying, though, at the same time, is not easy. It's difficult, because I don't expect you to advocate for anything that's easy, Dana. I think you want us to do the tough stuff, and absolutely good for you, but I think it is a difficult way forward. It challenges it's challenging many of the really fundamental assumptions in society, and it's arguing for incorporating the notion of leisure into social policy. And I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of it, is to somehow move us into having a say that people actually listen to do with social policy, and particularly to do with work and structures of work and structures of capitalism. But I don't think it's easy, as I said before. It's difficult. I'm not trying to be a naysayer, curmudgeon, or anything like that, but I do think what you're asking people to do is tough. And one of the reasons is that our discipline, like many others, it's not only us, but like many others, we are isolated from other disciplines. In other words, we talk to ourselves. And what we need to do is not just talk to ourselves, to move beyond talking to ourselves, which I think is part of what you're saying. I think, for example, we need to go to conferences that are not leisure conferences. They're conferences on something else. We need to try to publish in journals that are not leisure journals, but we may have something to say, whether it's health or whether it's work-related or whether it's other kinds of other types of disciplines that we go to. We also need to work in communities, and not just the provision of leisure. So many people have done amazing work in communities and facilitating leisure in communities. But what we need to do is to go out and work in other ways, to work with labor unions, for example, to work with government and social policy. And that brings up an issue that I think is also important, is for us to communicate outside our field to those people who are really involved with economic and social policy, and to get our voice there. Now, the difficult thing is, how do we do it? I would say it's not easy to go to other conferences. It's not easy to come from a leisure studies background and a leisure studies department and say, okay, I'm going to a psychology conference, a health conference, a work conference indeed, a social policy conference where we might have something to say. I have tried that in the past, of course many years ago now, but I have tried going to other conferences, and I think we're kind of blessed in Canada that we do have this big Humanities and Social Science Congress that happens every year, and people come from all disciplines. So it is possible for us to go and talk outside of our discipline to other groups. You get a strange reaction, you know, when I've tried that. I've found people say, you come from what department? What department was that? Leisure Studies department? That's a very typical first conversation that you might have with people from other disciplines, but it's worth it, I believe, to go to sociology, psychology, whatever it is, employment, conferences, and this is one way that we can get our message out. I don't think we can do it on our own. I think we have to infiltrate into these other disciplines, infiltrate into other areas of society to get these ideas and viewpoints accepted and known about, and vice versa. Mind you, we're not the only discipline who's isolated. Almost every academic discipline, I think, has become more and more looking inward and not looking outward. Despite all the talk about multidisciplinary research, it doesn't really happen very much. And if it does, it's two very, very close areas that people are working on. So I think what we need to get is our voice heard, to us to listen to what Dana's saying, to say, we have to think more broadly about society, not just about the leisure part of people's lives. And we need to get our viewpoint understood by people in other areas of work, and for them to understand us, and for us to understand them. So I think new conversations are needed. And I think you're starting this new conversation, or one of the new conversations that's happening, and I think that's really, really exciting. I think we can have an impact. We need truly multidisciplinary research. We need to be a bit braver and move outside our comfort within our own field to get this to be done. And I think we have matured as a discipline to be able to do this. I think in the very early years, and since I'm probably the oldest person here, I can say that, in the very early years, there was a real need for leisure studies to establish itself, to say this is who we are and this is what we do and this is why we're important. And we talk to each other and we develop a strength. We get our own journals and we read each other's research. But the time has come to move out, to think more broadly, to have ideas that really can have a social impact. So that's about all I have to say, except to congratulate you for everything you've done and congratulating you for your award. And I think your work will inspire everybody. And I do hope that people will be inspired to do the research. Perhaps you're going to do some too, I'm sure you are. But to inspire people to move in new directions. And this is what I think you've done. And I hope that this will work out and wonderful things will happen. Even though things are a little depressing in your country at the moment, all sorts of possibilities of change are possible. So thank you.
Okay, it's now my pleasure to moderate the discussion. I suspect most questions will be for Dr. Kleber, but we can open up to others in the audience as well. Just warning all you undergrads, silence does not make me uncomfortable. Sherry.
Thank you, Diana. Dana, thank you. This was indeed what Sue said, very inspiring. And very inspiring, and I agree with you completely. I think we need to be really critiquing notions or deconstructing notions of work and the implications of that. One of the things I wonder if you could speak about is because I agree with Sue as well, it's enormously challenging. I was just this week meeting with the Minister of Health to try and get therapeutic recreation taken out of the nursing envelope for funding. And as much as they really get it and they love what we do, it's so incredibly challenging. And I'm also wondering about how we can start to shift how we think about what's valued in academe. Because I think all the activist work that you do and advocacy work that many of us do here in this department needs to be valued more in terms of the work that's going to be necessary to get on this social policy agenda. So do you have anything to say about how we can start to really shift how we think of ourselves, not only as strong scholars, but also how we shift academe to really value the importance and the enormous amount of time it takes to do that activist work?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, in that book, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, they say the people who are going to make the paradigm shifts are the young people who are naive in their career and the other people who have nothing to lose. Well, there are a lot of people on your campus who are at the upper end of their careers who have nothing to lose, who can be the people who push the administration to say, you know, here's what we value in terms of tenure and promotion, or, you know, maybe we need to think about that or have a rethink on that. Or maybe, do you have faculty senate systems here too? Do you have a faculty senate? Yeah? Okay, so it's similar to our system. The faculty senate is a place where there's a lot of voice and advocacy that could occur, but I think it's really going to take the people who have gone through in their careers who really have nothing to lose to say, you know, the way that people have been tenured and promoted, maybe that's a little outdated. Maybe we need to add more value to advocacy, you know, as part of the service component of your portfolio, right? So I think it's going to take something like that. That's huge. I mean, on our campus, we're trying to figure out how to be strategic about institutionalizing community engagement. I don't know if this happens on your campus, but there are a lot of people on campus who are doing a lot of things with people in the community, whether it's research or their students are doing work with various community partners, but people don't know what's going on. So you may have someone who goes to a site in the community and turns out there are 4 or 5 people who are doing things and nobody knows about it. Does that sound familiar? Right. So it's really trying to figure out how can we be strategic about some of these things. And that just takes a lot of work, but I think it does take the people who have the power. And the people who have the power are the people who are tenured and promoted. And also upper-level administrators, you know, it requires talking to them and reminding them, you know what, you used to value these things around the professoriate. So I don't think it's easy. I think Sue raises a good point. I mean, it's all well and good for me to stand here and say that this needs to be done, but also having been an activist and started something where in San Francisco 30 years ago, where there wasn't a program for LGBT youth, and we just decided to do it because we were in that naive side of the paradigm. We just did it. And then over time, you know, what's that phrase? You fake it till you make it. I think we have to do that at a larger scale. Yeah.
Thanks, Sherry, for starting us off. Other questions?
Troy? Here to your left.
Thanks. Thanks for your wonderful talk, Dana. I thought it was excellent. I'm always excited when people in our field push us to move in radical directions. I wonder how you would respond to critiques centered around leisure as being elitist. So when I think, for instance, about people who are struggling, you know, to make ends meet, certainly in a capitalist society, the focus is going to tend toward work and getting work. And so when I think about one of the, I guess, groups that would need to come on board to make any change happen, it would be, you know, those individuals who could use leisure in their life and yet may see it as a luxury or an elitist construct. So I'm just kind of curious how you would respond to that sort of perspective.
Well, all the more reason to start from the perspective of critiquing work and the structure of capitalism, or, you know, the economic structures, really working with people like labor unions. I mean, having conversations with policymakers, other folks around, you know, economic development. It's not just about work, it's also about what drives economic development and what drives the creation of jobs. But maybe linking the people who are interested in investing in terms of economic development to revitalize communities around work, maybe talking with them about doing it in a way that incorporates the recognition that having leisure or vacation time or other things is ultimately going to be beneficial in terms of health and welfare of that community. So it's really kind of thinking outside of the box. I mean, these days a lot of people are talking about or creating innovation centers. We just got a lot of money thrown on our campus to open up an innovation center. I can't think of a better thing that's worth innovating and thinking about, if not for how can we look at work and leisure, you know, in a different, more innovative way. I mean, I've always found it was so interesting that the 40-hour work week got codified in about 1928. And all these other things happened throughout the 20th century in terms of modernity and post-modernity. And we were like, you know, all these technological and other advances, and yet we're still stuck in a 40-hour work week in the 21st century? What the hell? You know, I mean, seriously. I just find that so odd and out of step with all of the other things that we've made. But they're very powerful forces at work that want to maintain that structure. And, you know, FDR did almost sign that bill to shorten the work week, but it was the, you know, businesses that came in at the last minute. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for this very inspiring talk, and it really resonates in me. And I have to say, I'm an industrial psychologist, so I'm from the other side.
Okay.
So I am one of the persons who would be really willing to talk to you about work and leisure, and that's actually the topic of my research project. So
Fantastic.
I'm really happy to hear that this is so important now, and that you consider this one of the aspects for the future. So I totally agree that work and leisure, the boundaries are very permeable nowadays, very fluent, and so we should pay attention to both spheres of life. So yeah, this is just a comment that I'm really happy to hear that you're working on this.
Well, it's great that this is the area of your research, and that you could be one of the people that starts taking it to the policymakers.
Yes,
yeah.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and your speech. I'm wondering if I could maybe push back a little bit, and you raised the notion that we really haven't moved off the 40-hour work week, but we see Ontario implementing universal basic income, and that's a notion that is being adopted on both the right and the left in both Canada and the US, and we seem to be moving towards that. So I'm wondering if you've given any thought to how the advent of universal basic income will intersect with leisure as we move forward.
Well, to be honest, I don't really know much about that. It's a mandate that's come through? Yes. Okay.
So universal basic income will be starting in Ontario next year, I believe, or within the relative short period. So we are starting to see, I think, a recognition that the economy isn't providing for certain groups, and there is a need to provide them with an income. So I'm just wondering, yeah, if how those who have been supported by universal basic income understand or experience leisure.
Great questions. Great questions. I mean, I don't know if I know enough about the context of that to really, I mean, is there something on your mind? I mean, it sounds like, I wonder if you have an underlying thought about it.
Well, people won't be working.
I mean, do you think that people are going to be demotivated because they will be financially supported?
Correct, and there won't be the pressure to have potentially dual earner homes and the 40-hour work week. If there is a level of subsistence provided, will that free time for leisure? And then I'm also wondering, in that universal basic income that's provided, is there an opportunity for credits to be applied towards leisure? Similar to food stamps, but leisure stamps.
But I mean, it's interesting. I think it'll be interesting to follow that, and I think it would be something that would be worthwhile starting to structure a research project around from the beginning of the implementation of it. I think now would be a good time for that. I mean, when you were talking, though, I just was reminded of the Kellogg experiment during the Depression. The Kellogg cereal company, instead of employing people for 3 8-hour shifts, employed people for 6 hours and an additional shift, but paid people the same amount of money as if they worked 8 hours. And there was a lot of concern about that, similar to, I think, what you're saying. But it turned out that what they found was that people who did have the support were actually more involved and engaged in civic pursuits in their community. They volunteered more time, they did more things with their neighbors and their communities. I do think if people didn't have to fight and be concerned about health care as they do in the United States, or a basic living wage, or if they didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs because of being underemployed, then I think that people, if the cost of living and the quality of life expectations that people had were such that people had what they need, then yeah, if everybody were able to work fewer hours, I think the time that people had could go toward getting to know the people in their community and coming together to do things to bring about the change that the community would want to see. I mean, I actually also did community work in a neighborhood in which I lived in Sacramento, Oak Park. And it was amazing to see. It was primarily low income, had been predominantly African-American community, and a lot of white flight had occurred, so a lot of benign neglect was occurring in this community. But the neighborhood folks started to get together, right? People who were working many jobs, people who brought their kids to the meetings. It didn't matter. People wanted to see each other. And slowly over time, it's that coming together and people finding their voice that led people to go down to City Hall and agitate for things, that led for people to demand City Hall comes to the neighborhood association. So it's really, I think, supporting people to find their voice, to work together collectively, that's going to bring about some change. So.
Well, thanks, Dana. This is so exciting and so timely. I mean, I think that it's time to have this conversation. And I say that because I actually think work is in a lot of trouble. I think we're in for a major restructuring of how we think about work. You look at automated jobs, which is going to affect more men, middle-aged men, than anything else. It's going to happen in the next 10 years. A huge swath of men whose job in North America is to drive stuff, it's going to go. So we have a chance, I think, to think about that. And I think we have a lot to answer. I'm working with the Ontario government on precarity in rural communities, and they are looking for alternative ways to figure out how to manage not just income, which is an incredibly serious topic, but time use, sense of value, sense of worth, contribution, all these things. And I think we can step into that debate, and without being overly romantic about it, I think we actually have something to say. I don't think we can hold up the 40-hour work week in any way anymore for all of its problems. I think it's in deep trouble. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
Well, I mean, I do feel like Canada is on the leading edge for these things. I mean, I think that you have been more radical than the United States. You're probably always going to be more radical than the United States. I mean, I don't know. People from the U.S., is there a hope for us to be radical? I don't know. I don't know. Thank you.
Maybe you could run for president.
What do you think, Sharon? Anybody else? Any other questions? Oh, Mark, awesome.
Yeah, I've got about 20 things going through my mind, so thank you very much for getting the brain moving. And it's dangerous with me because I didn't bring anything to write, and so I'm just going to try to remember some of the main points. First of all, I'd like to, a personal critique with respect to merging scholarship and action. And I'm in the midst of writing a paper right now where I'm thinking about that. I'm at a late career, thinking retrospectively and introspectively, I guess, about what I've done. And I was writing on leisure and unemployment 20 years ago. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is that I've blown it because I didn't follow through on some of the things I intended to do. Now, I did some other stuff and fun stuff and good stuff, and so that's not the problem. Part of the problem is having time to devote to these things. But I look at my colleagues, the colleagues that are roughly in my cohort here, and Ron and Sherry and Brian, and they're light years ahead of me in terms of what they've done, merging their scholarship with their with action, so that's one thing that I've been struggling with personally. Yeah, Canada's wonderful, very wonderful in my mind at the moment, I say as a dual citizen. But we do have a lot of the same issues, same problems, and we're certainly struggling with the notion of basic income and those types of things. And the University of Waterloo, frankly, in some ways is part of the problem. We are creating new technology, especially, that is contributing to a lot of these traditional jobs being lost. Now, we're also part of the solution, because a lot of the traditional stuff that's out there, probably if we really critiqued it, isn't worth keeping, but for the income that it potentially provides. And then I'm thinking about our role in leisure studies with respect to, again, to this whole notion of work. We actually have had an integrated doctoral program in our faculty, or our college as it were, in American terminology, on work and health. And it was a joint operation between the School of Public Health and Health Systems, the Department of Kinesiology, and Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies. And it had awesome potential, but it's the one really, one of the integrated areas that we've tried to venture into that we've essentially pulled back. So I haven't got a question in here, and I'm not sure there is a question, other than I guess I'm speaking mainly to the young crowd now. You have so much opportunity. I mean, there's so many things that could be studied. This is a huge one that our field generally has not embraced to the extent it probably could have. And of course, when you got a program named Work and Health, what the hell does leisure have to do with it? Would be the obvious question that many people would ask, including people in our field. But there's so much out there, and we need a whole lot of people with a whole lot of hands and a whole lot of brains to pick up the torch, as it were, and carry it forward. So I'll leave it without a question, and maybe that'll spur someone else to speak.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to turn over to Zara, and then I'll get you as our last question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your talk. As I was listening, I was thinking about a different kind of work, which is the work of childhood that seems to be ever pressing for kids, what I call with my students high stakes childhood. And the idea that we're shifting away from the kind of play culture that used to exist to a really intense set of expectations and responsibilities, and I think also fears and worries for kids. And I was wondering if you could comment at all on what you think this kind of radical move might look like away from the adult work world but into the child work world. And I don't mean literal work world, but I mean the work that, particularly in the Western world, kids seem to have to do now. And what role or what kind of a call there might be in radical change for that population.
I think we need to go retro. I think we need to have retro play, like away from the technology, away from the iPads, away from so many structured opportunities and activities. Anybody here like Legos? Okay. Oh, awesome. Oh, excellent. I don't know. Okay. So I'm kind of in between. I'm not the oldest person here, but I'm definitely not the youngest. So I mean, I grew up with Legos, and you basically buy these sets, and you just create stuff. Well, now it's all, you read the book, right? I collect the Lego architecture series. But of course, I could not recreate the Chrysler building and myself going through Lego, so I do appreciate it. But I think it's interesting when you look at what the Lego company has done, they've cut out really opportunities for creating your own stuff. Or you can buy a very expensive book that gives you ideas about how to create your own stuff. I mean, it's kind of strange, and I think that illustrates the problem, which is, I think what the parents are doing is they're modeling the pressure that they are feeling, right? And it's all going down to the children. It's all about, it's not about nowhere to go, nothing to do, no one to be. It's all about, you got to be busy, you got to get somewhere, and you got to be somebody with a capital S. And I do think a lot of it does reflect the neoliberalism. I think it comes back to that. I think it comes back to the belief of the free market, and everything is about the free market, and everything is about the market will save us. I mean, look what's happening in the United States. It's all about, you know, give corporations a tax break because they are the people that need it. And corporations now are an identity or an entity because of Consumers United, because of a Supreme Court case. I mean, it boggles the mind. But I think whatever we see is happening with children is really just a reflection of what's happening with the parents and the larger culture. So I think things like retro. I think things like phone-free Sundays. You know, it's kind of ironic that there are camps that you can go to where the whole camp is about leaving behind your cell phone. Like, you know, you're having a week without your cell phone. Do you have those camps here? Yeah. So you have to go to a camp to get away from the technology. What's also interesting about that is the way in which we have created and reproduced a dependence upon other people for our own leisure. That's part of what the progression of the 20th century was. The more we've professionalized our field, the more we've created dependence upon us to help people figure out what they want to do. I think that's a problem. I think we need to challenge and resist that.
I don't need it, I'm very loud. In one of our master's classes with Heather, we've been...
You do still need it for the recording.
Sorry.
Okay. Just say
First and last. Yeah, so Heather Mayer, excellent professor. In our class, we've been heavily debating one of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights articles, 24, because it includes... Is it 24? Correct me. 24, sure. It includes leisure as a human right, but also paid vacation from work. So, as you mentioned, there's the trends that are shifting towards contract work, part-time work, not working. So how do you facilitate, how do you mandate the universal right to paid vacation when all of these trends are taking place in the workforce? And like, if we're going to go down to reduced work week, how do we kind of, do you think it still has a place in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? What are your thoughts around that?
I think everything may have to shift depending on how the 40-hour work week shakes out in the next 20 or 30 years. And so, I mean, I don't know if this is also happening here, but in some places in the States, when you're hired on, like at a tech company, you are not given vacation. Have you heard about this? You say what you want. That's kind of a new trend in the tech companies. So if you want to take 5 weeks, you say, I want to take 5 weeks. And most of the time, you're going to get it. So in that particular setting, the tech setting, I think if you went into, you know, the government, state government, and said, I'm going to take 5 weeks, they'll be like, well, here's your pink slip, right? You know, or you're crazy or something. So, I mean, I think a lot of it's really going to depend. Are we really going to get off the 40-hour work week? I mean, is it still 40 hours a week in Canada? Yes. And what about paid vacation? Is it mandated in any way, or is it conventional that most people have it? At least 1 week of paid vacation, or 2? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So neither of us are really doing well compared to our European or Scandinavian counterparts. So in a way, I think it's not bad to maybe spend time abroad to talk to them about how have they done it. But it's about the worldview. If the worldview is based on scarcity, which is the worldview of the United States, then competition will drive everything. And then the fear of not being seen as being good enough or a team player will always drive your personal decisions. I think that's what we have to attack, the scarcity mentality. So I think it's a big flipping job. Yeah.
There's a number of questions that people still have, but I'm under strict guidelines by Dr. Glover to cut this off at 2:15. So I am going to ask everyone to hold their question if you still have one and connect with Dr. Kivel at the break. I'm sure she would be happy to answer questions. But please join me in thanking Dr. Kivel for that excellent and intriguing talk.